Welcome to r/RedditRevenge. This is a story of someone getting back at someone with revenge after being wronged. And today we have 3 great stories, so subscribe, hit the like button, and let's begin. The first story. My cousin wanted to steal our grandparents' jewelry, but ended up with no money. The second story. Guy didn't pay the rent, so my stepmom bought his new house and rented it out to another family. The third story. Coworker at work was stealing food from colleagues. I fed him cockroaches. And the first story is, my cousin stole loads of jewelry, so I stole his inheritance. Backstory. 25 years ago, my aunt passed away when I was a baby, leaving my 2 cousins, who were both in their early 20s, alone to fend for themselves. My grandparents, who were very wealthy, put a clause in their will that grandkids will receive half of their share of inheritance if a parent passes before the children reach age 30, and then the other half when my grandparents eventually passed. Both my cousins received a very sizable inheritance, coupled with the money they got from selling my aunt's house. The younger of the 2 paid off her college loans and was able to buy property. She still lives on the same plot of land. The older sibling blew all of his money. Straight out of a book of the Bible, within 6 years, he was back to living in a condo working as a police officer. Everyone in our small family knew he had a substance issue, so he was barely making ends meet with his officer salary and buying copious amounts of prohibited substances. The next 4 years, my cousin went to rehab 3 times, sponsored by my grandparents. He sobered up after getting his girlfriend, now wife, pregnant. Absolutely wretched woman. She saw my grandparents as payday and essentially baby-trapped my cousin, thinking it was her ticket. Within 7 years, they had 3 kids, so she's locked in tight. She's a nurse, and with 3 kids around, they always needed a little boost. Guess who they would always ask? You got it, my grandparents. Being the kind spirits they are, they always lended a hand. My father, mother, and sister and I got sick of it very quickly. My grandmother unfortunately passed away when I was 17, leaving my grandpa as the last remaining. I was undoubtedly my grandfather's favorite among the kids, which left a real sore spot in the mouth of my cousin and his wife. I had 2 more years at home before college, so I lived with my grandpa to keep him company and help take care of him. My cousin and his wife hated this, so much so that whenever they came to visit and I was not home, they would send their 3 gremlins into my room to destroy it. My room had double doors, so it couldn't be locked. This was the start. The longer I lived there, the more they would mess with me. My cousin even went as far as to place one of those little mechanical noisemakers in the cabinet in my room. The one that plays sounds at random intervals that make you think you're insane. Thankfully, my German Shepherd would always hear it, and after a week or so, she finally found it. They did this to distance me and deter me from taking care of Grandpa, so they could swoop in and be the heroes. This continued until one of the kids found my gun. By this time, I was 18 and in the possession of a firearm. I use quotations because my grandfather has guns, but cannot aim and shoot them anymore due to arthritis and nerve degeneration. So when I moved in, he placed all the weapons in my hands, should the need of self-defense arise. But should he see them out for any reason other than cleaning, there would be hell to raise. Being very well trained with guns and having a sense of pride in defending my home, I took this responsibility very seriously. I always kept a handgun in a locked container in my nightstand with the key on a high shelf, out of reach from the gremlins. One fateful day, I'm out getting my grandfather food when I come home, and my older cousin, his wife, and my grandfather are staring at a gun on the table. It was my gun that I kept in the lockbox. It was loaded and had a bullet chambered. I always keep a magazine in the lockbox but never load it into the gun. The lockbox was nowhere to be seen. My cousin claimed one of the children found the gun and was playing with it. I was 100% certain that he either found the key or broke the lockbox open to get to it and load it, as a 6-year-old would not be able to reach a key I could barely grab, figure out what it was, load my gun and chamber it. I tried my best to explain what my cousin had said was BS and that I never keep my firearms loaded in the house. But my cousin, who's a cop, scolded me on gun safety and threatened to have me arrested if I didn't leave, and hadn't arrested me yet because we're family. I was asked to collect my belongings and go back to my parents. My cousin had won, or so he thought. The next day, I apologized to Grandpa and explained to him there was no way one of the kids could have gotten the key. He agreed with me and he apologized, but he thought it best I move out until things cool down, but once they do, I would be welcome back home. Our relationship was a little fractured due to disinformation provided by my cousin. A month later, my grandfather died of a heart attack at 86. I was devastated. I was just beginning to get back into rhythm with him and rebuilding the trust that was somewhat shattered. To this day, I'm still unsure of what kind of man he saw me as due to my cousin. Immediately, my cousin and his wife began sucking up to my dad, as they had sealed payday with Grandpa. It was time to move on to the uncle. This persisted for a month or two. I wouldn't stand for it. Then came time for the will. My grandfather's lawyer read out the will to me, my father, mother, and sister in our home. Our two cousins would be briefed individually on their share of the estate, per my grandparents' requests. Then the miracle line in the will comes to fruition. If anyone attempts to claim any part of the estate that is not assigned to them, they forfeit any assets they're supposed to receive and will be divided equally among the remaining family members. This was basically their way of saying, if you try to claim more than you're given, you get nothing. My father is supposed to receive every piece of physical property, aside from 2 or 3 items he set aside for me, from my grandparents, as he's the only remaining child. The revenge. I hatched my plan. I called my cousin and told him all of my grandma's jewelry was to be donated to a charity auction. Grandma's collection of gems and medals was extensive to say the least, so a charity event wouldn't care if a few pieces didn't make it, right? It was a lure of gargantuan proportions that my greedy bee of a cousin could not resist. He bit right on it and headed over to my grandparents' house ASAP, determined to snatch up as much as he could. A handful would send his kids to college. Regardless of what I said, the jewelry was never going to go to him anyways, so his actions were purely his own, since none of it was destined to be his. Coincidentally, Dad was on his way with the lawyer to my grandparents' house to overlook everything. Formality stuff. According to my dad's testimony, my cousin had 3 shoeboxes worth of Grandma and Grandpa's jewelry piled up on the kitchen counter, ready for loading into his car. My dad and the lawyer stood in the kitchen, wondering why it was all there, when my cousin walks in from my grandparents' bedroom with a 4th and final shoebox. The jig was up, and he put 2 and 2 together that I set him up, which was true, but there was no penalty against me for exploiting my cousin's greed, so he would F himself over. It's worth noting that between the 18 years from my aunt's death and my grandpa's death, their wealth had increased several times over, so my cousin felt cheated and expected to receive just as much as my sister and I, despite receiving half of his already and blowing it. Throughout this whole ordeal, his younger sister, my other cousin, has not had a problem at all and is still weeping over Grandpa's death like the rest of us. However, just like that, my cousin lost enough money in the course of 30 minutes that made him contemplate his sanity. Over greed. My cousin's bee of a wife apparently filed for divorce a few weeks later. We haven't heard from him in nearly 60 years, as he is all but disgraced now. You can call this a fairy tale ending, and on this particular part of the story, it somewhat is. There was a massive lawsuit by an unknown family member involving the IRS and FBI later on, but honestly, I'd rather have my grandparents. The second story is, damage my home, I'll take yours. My MIL is a pretty well-off woman. She owns a large number of rental properties, and her husband have a huge house located just outside NYC. It's got an indoor pool, sauna, elevators, etc., and is worth well into the 7 figures. Sadly, her husband passed away, and she remarried and moved out of state. She put the house up for rent shortly after. A broker approached her with 2 prospective tenants. The tenants were music producers and had some legit acts they worked with. One of them was the business guy, and the other was the talent. The talent I'll call Ben. The 2 were partners in the beginning, and the business guy made sure the rent was paid on time. He was legit and did not screw around. They used the house as a place for artists to chill out and work on their music. After a couple of years, Biz Guy and Ben had some sort of falling out, and Biz Guy left and Ben stuck around. At first, he continued to pay the rent on time, but after a few months, it kept getting later and later. By itself, not the worst thing. Owning real estate, it comes with the territory. But he started getting aggressive and racist as MIL kept insisting that she needed to be paid. MIL is not a mean person and values politeness and manners above all else. Finally, MIL had enough and had him evicted. After the eviction, they went through the house and assessed over $100,000 in damages. Sig burns in the carpet, stains on the wall, pool filters and plumbing damage, etc. She took him to court, won, and had a lien placed against all of his property. Ben was dead broke at this point aside from his home, and she just didn't see the point in trying to get blood from a stone, so she just moved on. Fast forward about 15 years. MIL receives a notice in the mail that the bank is foreclosing on Ben's home. Because she had a lien placed on all his assets, the bank was asking a judge to dismiss her lien so that they could collect what they owed from the sale of the home. MIL was obviously going to contest this, but then she got clever. She approached the bank and basically said, look, sell me the house at fair market value less what I'm owed, and you'll save on foreclosure costs, brokers, lawyers, etc. I have cash on hand, and it's a win-win for everyone. Bank agreed and she purchased the house for almost 25% below market value. Mind you that 25% was money she was owed anyway, but still, she didn't think she would ever see it again. Of course, given all of Ben's a-hole behavior, she wasn't going to just take the house without having him who was going to take it. So she found out the day they were moving out and stopped by. Ben had a bit of difficulty placing her. It had been over a decade since they last spoke, but once he realized who she was, he basically cussed her out. She never said a word, just smiled. She's since rented out his home to a lovely family with no issues. The last story is Quarter Pounder with Cheese, Extra Roaches. I was working a very demanding job in Florida. We had 3 shifts and they were staggered to overlap by 3 to 4 hours to increase production. I worked the 3rd shift from 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. and had to bring my lunch because we weren't near anything open then except for a gas station. A few of us noticed our lunches were being eaten. Typically, it was anything in a bag from a restaurant or a Tupperware container. Often, all the lunches were pilfered and dessert or snack items were taken. We spoke to management about it, but they were hesitant to do anything. They suggested it was one of us doing it to our fellow members. One day, my entire lunch, drinks, everything was taken. I had to buy candy bars and soda to eat, and a coworker shared some of his remaining lunch. So basically, 12 hours of very physical work on candy and a bit of rice. I was absolutely furious. I knew it wasn't my shift members, and they were just as angry as I was. I told them that I was going to set a trap, and we would get some vengeance on the person who had been stealing our food. I stopped by McDonald's on the way to work the next few days and ordered a Quarter Pounder with cheese on the side. I'd gathered some palmetto bugs, giant flying roaches about 2 inches long, and put 2 on the burger and placed the cheese on the top. I then labeled the bag and put it in the fridge. I was careful to throw it away each day and replace it with a new one. I really wanted to burn this bee. On day 3, I came down to the lunchroom and the bag was in the garbage. I was just giddy thinking of what happened. I dug through the trash and found the bag, the box from the burger and the burger with a few big bites out of it. Our entire shift was laughing our A off all night. In the morning, I was told to stick around and meet with the plant manager. I was confused and scared, but I technically did nothing wrong. I get sent into his office, and here's a second shift employee recently hired, and the brother of a longtime employee. I'm told how he ate some food and a person had placed roaches on it. So I was the bad guy. I explained that I did in fact have a burger with roaches on it. That's my business. He shouldn't have been stealing food. He countered with saying that he thought it was his. I pulled the bag out of my backpack. With my name on each side, he wanted to receive an apology and be excused from work for his inconvenience. The manager said he would discuss it further with me and asked him to leave. He said he knew I had set a trap. I didn't respond. He started laughing and said he would give him a written warning for stealing food, but I was told not to put any roach food in the fridge from that day forward. I told everyone I talked to that he was the one stealing the food. His brother tried to make me the bad guy for baiting him with a roach burger, but the damage was done. He was being trash-talked and confronted all week. Finally, he resigned. I still get a good laugh thinking about him biting into the burger. I hope you love these stories. Be sure to subscribe if you want to know when the new video comes out.